Time now for our Entre Nous segment, and today we're focusing on French demographics. Solange Mougin joins us in the studio to discuss some of these facts and figures. Solange, great to see you. Why are we talking about this right now?
Well, we're discussing this because starting today, the French census begins. In French, it's called le recensement, and across the country, agents of the National Institute of Statistics and Economic Studies, or as people call it in French, l'INSEE, they will begin knocking on doors across the country, and they'll do this for a little over a month. The dates in mainland France are from January 16th to February 22nd. The days for overseas territories and departments are slightly different and run until March 8th. Now, how does the census work in France? Well, it is a yearly event, but not everyone gets called on to do this civic duty every year. But around 9 million people do, and across 5 million homes they are questioned. Now, as for the methods, they're broken down into two categories. For those that live in cities and towns with less than 10,000 people, the census is taken every 5 years there. In places with larger populations, 8% of addresses are questioned every year. As for how it all happens, well, an agent is hired by l'INSEE to come to doors. In some places, they're post office employees mandated by the town, and they give out these login numbers for people to fill in an online questionnaire or to fill out a paper form. Now, the questions are pretty standard fare when it comes to censuses. They're about people's ages, occupations, housing situation, work, modes of transport. And they are also, and this is very important, anonymous. As l'INSEE, which is the only body that is allowed to gather this data, they analyze the figures, but not who filled them out.
Now, the census questionnaires rarely change, but this time around there's been a bit of controversy. Why?
Yeah, you could even say there's been a backlash. Considering the warnings from the French League of Human Rights and a number of unions. They've even called for people not to fill out one question in particular. So to break this down, this year, l'INSEE added 3 new questions. One's about whether you do télétravail or work remotely. The second is about health impairments if they keep you from doing daily life stuff. And the third question, and this is the controversial one, asks where your parents were born and if they were born abroad. Now, this question is not mandatory like the other questions are. And the reason it has created so much controversy is because in France, questions about one's ethnicity or religious affiliation or sexual orientation, well, they are largely not allowed. Exceptions, of course, are occasionally made, but for the most part, French law says, and the Constitutional Court has backed this up, all citizens are equal before the law regardless of their race, religion, sexual orientation. So if we go back to this controversy about this question right here, the League of Human Rights in France says the question of one's parents' origin gets too close to an ethnicity question. They say that they're worried that the data could eventually be used politically, considering that the far right and the National Rally in the last campaign had stances towards about people's immigrant background. That fear, the fear actually, is that it could solidify prejudices in the future politically. The other side says that those that back the question say that this is an important piece of the puzzle of finding out about who French people are. The League of Human Rights counter that argument, saying that France already does ethnicity studies and has data on this. It's just not part of a census, which serves of course, statisticians, but also has a main purpose with a wider political and societal and electoral implications.
So, Solange, what are some of the implications here?
Well, I mentioned earlier that like voting, this is a bit of a civic duty, because not only does the data provide not only is this a trove of data, but it also allows the state to calculate how much money one city or town, depending on its population, how much they get. It has effect on municipal elections, how they're carried out. It also gives elected officials a better idea of whether they say they need to create a new school, a nursery, new roads, transportation. So it is essentially essential on a local level, but it also helps on a broader level as well, permitting the state to say, look at shifts in population in France compared, say, to the rest of Europe. France is currently the second most populated nation in the European Union after Germany, but it wasn't always that way, as we're about to see in this old newsreel from just after World War II.
In 1800, the French population was 1/6 of Europe's. It's now 1/12. France needs children that play and laugh, ones that tomorrow will be workers and protectors. We must be careful. Grandeur is often a question of numbers.
Now, such incitements to have more children do not always go down don't go down as well as they may have in the years following World War II, when actually there was a baby boom in France. Emmanuel Macron's prompting a year ago for a demographic rearmament, un réarmement démographique, or for people basically to have more children, it was actually met with quite a lot of backlash because of his choice of words.
Now, in regards to demographics, Solange, January is the only month where not only the month where the census begins, but rather the month where the previous figures are published.
Yeah, l'INSEE earlier this week broke down where France is at in regard to demographics. And I have the 2024 numbers for you. The French population is, as of January 1st, 2025, at 68.6 million people. This is actually 0.25, a quarter of a percent more than it was the previous year, namely because of 170,000 more people moving to France rather than leaving or dying. The birth rate, of course, has to do with this as well, but only actually minimally. France's birth rate was at 1.62 children per woman. That's a drop of over 2% from the previous year and the lowest rate since right after World War I, 1919. France's births are precariously close to the number of deaths, and this every year. Last year, there were just 17,000 more births, and that is not enough to maintain the generational population. Hence the calls to have more babies. But again, this is a problem that is afflicting many nations across the globe. It warrants a chronique in itself. The reasons are complex and puzzling, and it touches developed nations as well as underdeveloped ones. As for life expectancy, French women live on average 85.6 years. That's a stable figure and one of the highest in Europe. And I also have good news for French men. They have finally hit the bar of 80 years of life expectancy. And I have one final tidbit of good news for you as well when it comes to demographics, and that while couples are having fewer babies, love is still in the air. Last year's census showed that the number of marriages was up by 2%. This is actually a multi-year trend, but this was a jump that hadn't been seen in 15 years. So babies may be out, but love and weddings are not.
Maybe babies are around the corner. Who knows?
Who knows?
Thank you very much for that, Solange. Solange Mougin there with our Entre Nous segment.